Evening. Hope you're all well. We're learning Maseches Sotah, Daf Lamed Hey, and we're starting on the very bottom line of Lamed Daled Lamed Beis. We're going to be discussing a lot of the elements of the Chet HaMeraglim. And the Gemara says 3 lines from the bottom, Vayashuvu mitur haaretz, that the Meraglim, came back from scouting out the land. And on the top of the next page on Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, it says Vayelchu Vayavo, a double language. Why the double language? So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Reb Shimon ben Yochai, Makish Halicha Labia. They're returning home from the scouting. Must have been similar to their departure for the scouting. How so? Mabia be'etz ra. Just like when they returned, they came back with eitz ra. Af halicha be'etz ra. Even before they ever left, this whole thing was a ruse. All of this was for them to say, the Kalev and Yoshua people, was to say this was a disaster, we're not doing this. Says the Gemara, Vayisperu lo, Vayomru banu. They say, Vayomru banu, let's just read the whole pasuk. The pasuk says, Banu el haaretz asher shalachtanu v'gam zavas chalavu dvash hi v'zeh pirya. The first thing that these guys said, and now we know that even their Yitzia was l'shem ra. They said, wow, land of milk and flowing honey. And then Uchsiv Efes Ki Az Ha'am. No, it's not such a Geshmak land. There's giants in this land. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yochanan, Mishum Reb Meir, Kol Lashon Hara, She'ein Bo Davar Emes B'tchilaso, Ein Miskayim B'sofo. Lashon Hara, in order for it to stand, has to have an element of emes in it. It can't all be sheker. There has to be a degree of truth. So they agree, Taka, there is Zavas Chalav Dvash. There's also giants. But when they spoke negatively that there were giants, that was only on the heels of having said something complimentary. The pasuk then says, "Vayas Kalev Esa'am El Moshe." What does Vayahas mean? Amar Rabba. Rabba says, "Shehi sisan b'dvarim." He tried to talk to them in words. So Pasach Yoshua de Kamishtai. Yoshua opened up his mouth. He was going to say something, and Amrei Le and the other Meraglim just shut him down. Dain Rosh Katia Yamalel. This guy who is the Rosh Katia, the head of that which is cut off, is Yamalel. He's going to speak. In other words, he had no children. And because he had no children, the Yerusha components of Eretz Yisrael, his son wasn't going to go into battle. Wait, what are you talking about? You're not even shaykh to the conversation. Leave it be. So he said to himself, Amar, if I'm just going to talk regularly, Amri bi milsa v'chasminli. They're going to shut me down. If they're going to shut me down, I have to come up with another approach. So he put on his educational cap and he came up with a new approach of how to talk to them. 12 lines down. Lamed Hamid Al.
Before he leaves, let's cover this with going by
the what?
That he said that he knew that they were wrong, right? But he needed to kill it, or else he was going to die like they killed Kor.
You're talking about Yoshua? No.
Same thing. You got to have a little bit of. He made a plan.
Oh, yeah. So Yoshua had to be strategic.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sach Sanhedrin.
So Amar Lahen, he said, I have a whole new approach. Is this all that Ben Amram? Yeah, is this all that Ben Amram did? And it left a subtle implication that he was going to say something negative. Savre bignuse komishtae. Everyone who heard Yehoshua's ruse thought that he was going to say something negative. So ishtiku, and that's how you get people's attention when you have some juicy gossip. So he played the gossip card, even though he said nothing negative. And Amar Lahu Hotzianu Mimitzrayim, he spun the whole thing. He said, no, he took us out of Egypt. He split the sea for us, and he arranged for man to come from heaven. Im Yomar Asus Sulamos. And if he would tell us to do something crazy like build ladders and climb up to the sky, lo nishmalo, would we not listen to him? What are you guys talking about? Moshe knows what he's talking about. What's with all the Meraglim stuff? So says the Gemara, Allah alona alev yarashnu. So he says that's what the pasuk says. What's missing in the pasuk is the dialogue. But what he says, the alona, no, we can do this. We can go into Eretz Yisrael. These guys are wrong. Yoshua was playing a strong hand. No, they said we're not able to. Amar Reb Chanina Bar Papa Davar Gadol Dibru Meraglim Ba'osasha. They said something really outlandish. Ki Chazak Humi Menu. They had said that they are stronger than us. So there's another way to read this. Al Tikri Mimenu in the classical way. Elami Menu in that they are stronger than Hashem. In other words, we're really, this was Sur ben Michael, right? So there's Ma'asav Shel Kodesh Baruch Hu from yesterday. Even the owner of the house couldn't take the kelim out. Obviously, a mashal hedyot that a Kodesh Baruch Hu couldn't solve this problem. He couldn't even take his kelim out of his house. Namely, he couldn't take the people out of the land. It's his house. It's his land. The people who were there were put there by him. He could remove them whenever he wants.
So then you have freedom of choice, go about the water.
Right, in theory, except that in fact they did rebel, so they didn't have free choice. But his point was that Moshe, look, every time we've had great leaders, they get it's not pasha to be a great leader. You're always going to have people who don't like you. So I don't know if they didn't like Moshe, but they certainly Korach didn't like Moshe. I think that's fair to say. He's right, Rav Lachem b'nei Levi. So over here too, not everybody listened to Yoshua, not everybody listened to Moshe. Says the Gemara, Eretz Ocheles Yoshvehi. The argument back from the Meraglim was, no, this is a land where people get consumed by the land. This is a very difficult Gemara. It's not difficult to understand the flow, but the messaging is difficult. Dorash Rava. Rava says, Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ani chashavti ala tova. I thought that burying certain people was going to be a good thing. V'heim chashvu l'ra. And they interpreted it as bad. Says the Gemara, Ani chashavti ala tova dekol heicha dematu. Whenever they got to a new place in Eretz Yisrael, mace, somebody died. Chashiva didhu ki hechi denitradu below lishalu abasraihu, so that they'd be focused in their community and not worry about the people around them. People are going to die anyway, so he chose that they should die at that time, whatever the din is. That was just so that they would not be focused on their surroundings, but be happy that they've moved in. Vika de Amre, some say no, it was actually not a random person who died, but Eov noch nafshe v'itridu kol alma bespeda. What the Gemara says when it says Eretz Ocheles Yoshua is talking about the death of Eov, and everyone was consumed with that. And Heim Chashvu l'ra, that Eretz Ocheles Yoshua, that everyone would die. Says the Gemara, the next part of the pasuk is Vanahi ba'einenu kechagavim v'chein hayinu. In our eyes, we appeared relative to them as chagavim, as grasshoppers. We were a little bug. I just walked through a rainforest last week. The bugs are everywhere, and I would be the giant, right? So if I was the anak, they were saying I'm a little ant that you almost stepped on as you were walking through the jungle. But then the pasuk says v'chein hayinu beinehem, that they thought that of us too. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rav Misharshim Meraglim Shakru Hava. What liars? How do they know what the giants were thinking? They didn't sit down and talk to them. I could understand that you're going to say that I felt relative to them like a chagav. I'm very small; they're very big. But how do you know? How do you know that that's how they felt? Maybe they thought that you were a normal size. Okay, whatever the case may be. Says the Gemara, that's actually not true what Rav Misharshia said below. He wasn't sheker. Says the Gemara, ki havu mavri avele, when they were doing the Sudas Havra. Mavri is the language from Havra. They were giving the Suda to an Avel. So they were sitting, Tuse Arze, Havu Mavri, they were sitting under a cedar tree. When they were seen, Salku Yasve Beilane, they climbed up in the trees. And Shame de Ka'amri, and they heard the giants saying, Kachazin and Inish de Damu Lekamse Beilane. I see people sitting in the trees that look like grasshoppers. So Taka, it was true that V'chein Hayinu Bechagavim, in the line of Rav Misharshia, that it was dishonest that the pasuk said V'chein Hayinu Bein. It was actually a fine comment. The pasuk says Vatisa Kol Hayda Vayitnu Kolam Vayivku, that everyone raised their eyes and everybody cried. Amar Rabba, famous Gemara, Amar Rav Yochanan, Oso Hayom Erev Tisha B'Av Hayo. Maybe it's not Erev Tisha B'Av, maybe it's actually Tisha B'Av, that's why there's brackets. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hein Bachu B'chiyah Shel Chinam, Vani Ekva Lahem B'chiyah L'Doros. They were crying over nothing because I already told them that Eretz Yisrael is good for them. You're sitting there crying over something that you shouldn't even be crying about in the first place. If you can't get around, can't get over your feelings, which make no sense, then you're going to establish for yourself a day of Bechi forever. The multiple Batei Medrash were destroyed. I am Sham and the Meforshim about all the terrible tragedies that have happened on Tisha B'Av L'Dorei Doros. The pasuk says, last of the short lines, we have a little bit of a bump here with that small Tosfos there in the middle. Says the Gemara, "Vayomru kol ha'ida lirgo mosam ba'avanim." It says that they should be stoned. They should be stoned for what they've done. Both of these are in the same exact pasuk. So why do we have in one pasuk that there should be stones, and then at the same time that Hashem will appear in Ol Moed? It's so odd. They took stones and it's like the Tower of Bavel, Migdal Bavel. Well, you built the Migdal, now you can reach HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No, it's it's just such an odd thing. So here too, they're throwing rocks heavenward as if to hit HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Pasuk says, the people who were motzi dibas ra, they died in a plague. Amar of Shimon ben Laki shemeso misa meshuna, they died in a very, very bad way. Amar of Chanina bar Papa Dorish of Shila ish kvar timrasa. How did they die? Can't make this stuff up. Melamed shenishtar bev leshonam, their tongues stretched. V'nafal al tiburam, and it stretched all the way down to their navel, to their belly button. V'hayu tolaim yotos mileshonam, there were worms that leapt from their tongue, v'nichnasos b'tiburam, and entered into their belly button. Umitiburam, and then they traveled back, v'nichnasos b'leshonam, and that's how they died.
Introduction of emotion has it not to get it right at the dream. Also have that terrible thing using. Yeah.
This is not Gishmak.
No.
It's not Gishmak. Also, like I'm sure there's more here because there's a navel is like the birthplace a little bit, like you're connected. I'm sure there's
Tongue is obvious.
Tongue is obvious. Yeah. Okay. But Rav Nachman Bar Yitzchak takes a little bit more of a medical approach. I don't know if I can call it that because we're in the middle of Sfira and all the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva died from Askara. It says the Gemara, Amar be'Askara Mesu, they died from this throat disease, from having been Shalom Nagu Kavod Zebazeh. So over here it was because of the Lashon Hara that they spoke. The pasuk says, "V'kevan shala achron shebi Yisrael mina Yarden." Once the last Israelite, Yisrael as opposed to Kohen, left the Jordan River. Once that happened, chazru mayim lemakomon, the waters then came back. Now let's remember, what first caused the waters to stop? A Kohen stepping into the water. So here it says in the carrying an arrow. So here it says that when did the waters return? When the last Yisrael got out of the water, which means where were the Kohanim? Still in the water, seemingly. Because the only reason the water opened in the first place was because they were there. So it's a little bit, the Gemara deals with this. And then Vayelchu kitmo shilshom al kol gedosav, the water came back like it was a few days ago, filling up over the edges. Nimtza, what do we see from this pasuk? Aaron v'nosav v'kohanim mitzad echad, v'Yisrael mitzad echad. Based on the Pshat and the Psukim, it seems to be the case that the Kohanim were stuck on the west side of the Jordan River, and the Jews were on the Israel Jews were on the east side of the Jordan River. So how did they get over the river? So I guess they could have walked back in the river, but that's not what the Gemara says. From here we see Nosa Aaron as Nosa ve'avar, that the Aaron had the capacity to carry those who thought that they were carrying the Aaron. Shenemar vahi kasher tam kol ha'am la'avor, after everybody passed over the river, vayavor Aaron Hashem ve'hakohanim lifnei ha'am, the Aaron Hashem, and then subsequently the Kohanim were carried over. The Davar Zed Ne'anash Uzzah, the famed story from Tanakh by Eli and Shmuel, that Uzzah was killed for having tried to catch, quote unquote, the Aaron. Shenemar vayavo ad goren kiyadon v'yishlach Uzzah es yado lechos es Aaron. It was a bumpy ride. He saw the Aaron was tilting a little bit, so he reached out as if to try and catch natural instincts. But you can't do that klape shmaya. You can't do that by an Aaron. You should do that by the hagbas that people don't know how to do. You should definitely reach out and try to help. But over here, you're not allowed to do that. Amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu Uzzah. Well, come on. Nosa, but atzma lo kol shekain. It carries the people who carry it, and you don't think it can manage on its own. You got it all backwards. So it says the pasuk in Chumash, 10 lines from the bottom. Vayichar af Hashem be'Uzzah vayakeu sham al hashal, and he killed him on the shal. What does the word shal mean? Rav Yochanan, Rebbe Lazar. Chad Amar al iskei shalo, that he did something wrong. Shalo, shal, that he did something wrong. V'chad Amar she'asa tzrachav b'fanav, that he went to the bathroom in front of the Aaron, not like on the Aron, but too close to the Aron.
This is in place of him trying to hold it up, or this is in addition.
It was no al hashal. Yeah, I don't know. Because the pasuk just says Vayichar af Hashem be'uza. So from the pasuk alone, we don't know directly and immediately. We don't know what he did wrong. The Gemara said what he did wrong,
Right.
but from the psukim, there's actually machlokas amoraim. One of them says it was al iske shalo that he reached out, and over here it doesn't seem that way. It seems that al asher sha'asa tzracha b'fanav. Also sha'asa tzracha b'fanav. What does that have to do with the word shal?
Russian.
Yeah, what does he say?
It's a little bit too much grammar for me, but from V'chol Yishal Zeisecha Ubishil Yasa Davar Amoto Lamala Lamad, something that goes from up to down.
It was defecating. Yeah, bodily function.
Ubishil Yasa Yotze.
Right. Yeah. Still an odd word.
It's I totally agree.
Yeah. Okay. So says the Gemara, Amar of Yochanan, don't worry, Uza ba le'olam haba. Even though he did make a mistake, he still married at olam haba. Shneimar im Aron ho Elokim ma'aron le'olam kayam af Uza ba le'olam haba. Just like the Aron is forever, af Uza ba le'olam haba. I watched the whole documentary on where the Aron is. Pape, the secular people, they think there's this place in like Ethiopia that's housing the. So we know, you saw that. So we have in our Gemara, we learned this in Maseches Yuma, maybe a couple of other places, that one of the badim of the Aron was sticking up, and somebody went to pick up the towel and he died. So we have a bit of shtickle Masora that it's over here in the tunnels. We also saw in this Masechta that there are things that are actually in the tunnels that are under Yerushalayim. I don't know if we've scoured them all. We're still finding things archaeologically. Don't know. Says the pasuk Vayichar LeDavid al asher paratz Hashem peretz be'uza. Here we see that David got angry. What does that mean? Why would David get angry at a Kodesh Baruch Hu? That's very odd. You want to be sad, I understand, but to be angry, says the Gemara, this word Vayichar doesn't mean angry. Amar Rabbi Lazar shenishtanu panav kecharora. It was like a cooked dish. His face had a certain reaction to the death of Uzzah. So says the Gemara Elamayata, if that's true that you get to reinterpret the word Vayichar as kecharora over here, if that's true, kol heichad Vayichar hachanami, would you say that every time it says Vayichar, we get to translate it however is convenient? It says the Gemara, no. Awesome. Over there, when it says Vayichar Hashem be'uza, it added the word af, Vayichar af be'uza. That's anger. But hacha, when it says Vayichar loksiv af without the word af, then we have room to reinterpret as kecharora. Why was David going to get a punishment? Because he referred to divrei Torah as zemiros. That there was song of all of your laws in my house. We would have thought that was beautiful, but that was we'll see why in a moment that wasn't a good thing. Divrei Torah shekasu behen atufeinecha bo ve'einenu atakoreo son zemiros. That which it says that which makes your eyes tired, it won't be anymore. Namely, the Torah can invigorate you. You're calling those zmiros. I'm going to make you stumble in an area that even every little child in Cheder knows the mistake that you're going to make. As the pasuk says, that David, he moved the Aron on a cart. Why would David move the Aron on a cart? Everybody knows that the Aron can take care of its own on its own weight. So then he put it on the cart, and then it started to fall, and then Uzzah reached out. So David was indirectly involved / responsible in some way for what happened with Uzzah.
Wasn't most of it came back on kind of self. In other words, they go in and depletion, so depletion, right? And then it came back on an Agala, and then David brought it in, and they brought in the trumpets and the bottom fanfare, but they actually left it on the Agala. That was it.
No, but it stayed in a city for a couple of years at that point. It wasn't. Yes, they did. The Plishtim did give back the Aron, but it wasn't immediate that David took it back. It stayed there for a couple of years. When he transported it afterwards, he still had it on a cart or put it on a cart.
Two oxen
yeah,
without human interaction.
Yeah,
intervention.
Yeah, the Gemara doesn't speak about that here, but the Rishonim remind us of the story that there was a couple of years delay there. So yes, when they brought it back, it was probably as you said, but when he took it back to Yerushalayim, correct. Well, that's actually to another stop, but yes. Says the Gemara, Vayach ba'anshe Beis Shemesh ki ra'u ba'aron. The people of Beis Shemesh, they were injured, they got hit because they saw the Aron. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? Mishum de ra'u vayach. Just because they saw something, then they get injured. Why would that happen? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Abov, Rabbi Lazar, Machlokes, Chadamar, Kotzrin, Umishtachavin hayu. That they were Kotzrin Umishtachavin. Take a look at Rashi. Rashi's in the outer margin, the last Rashi on the page. Kotzrin, they were harvesting. Umishtachavin hayu. They just kind of gave a little bow out of respect. But lo batlu mimalachta nechavdo. That's not right. That's not right. You have to stop working. You have to stand up. You have to go out and watch the parade, watch the whole entourage. But it's not right to just look from afar. So that's why the people in Beis Shemesh, when they saw the Aron moving, they did the wrong thing. That was like that joke that used to go around about the golfer. They were on this golf course, and this guy, they see a funeral go by, and this guy takes his hat off, and he puts it over his heart, and he's playing with another guy. The guy's like, "That's really sensitive of you." He's like, "Listen, after 55 years of marriage, it's the least I can do for my wife, you know." So it's rude. That's what the Gemara is saying. It's not polite. When the Aron is moving around, you have to be able to show appropriate cover. Or another reason as to why they were punished, says the Gemara, V'chad Amar, Mili Nami Amar. They also said something that they shouldn't have said. Top of Lamed Hey Amud Beis, going to the very, very top line of Lamed Vav Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, Man amarecha de imrias, uman asa alach de afaisis. The ones that you were afraid of, are you still afraid of them? And the ones that made everything all better, is everything all better right now? This was a little bit of a biting line. And Rashi explains this now on the inner margin. Man amarecha de imaris. Mich ischa, who made you so angry? Kishe ka'asta v'lo hitzaltas atzmecha min hashivya. You're the Aron. You don't need anybody's help. Float out. Go do what you need to do. So the Jewish people were frustrated that it was sitting here wherever it was sitting with the plishtim, or even afterwards before it was in Yerushalayim. You don't need anybody's help. The Uzzah died because we thought there's no help needed over here, so just do your own thing. So that was what they said, and then they got punished. And the pasuk says, "Vayach be'am shivim ish v'chamishim elef ish." There were 70 men, and there were 50,000 men. So which one was it? It's Rabbi Abov, Rabbi Lazar, another machlokas. Chad amar shivim ish hayu. Really, it was only 70 people who were killed. However, v'kol echad ve'echad shakul kechamishim elef. Each one of these people were, if there could be a price put on a person, each one of them was equivalent to 50,000 people. V'chad amar chamishim elef hayu. Really, it was 50,000 people. V'kol echad ve'echad shakul keshivim Sanhedrin. There were 50,000 people who died. And everyone was equivalent to the 70 of Sanhedrin, massive Talmidei Chachamim, huge loss. The pasuk says, "Vayhi ki tzadu nose Aron Hashem shisha tzadim." They took 6 steps, and then vayizbach shor umari, and then they would slaughter a shor, which is an ox. Umari is a fattened animal. But another pasuk says, "Uchsiv shiva parim v'shiva elim." So which one was it? Was it the shor umari that they shechted, or was it the 7 parim and the 7 elim? Amar Rav Papa Bar Shmuel al kol psia upsia shor umari. When they were walking with the Aron, every step they took warranted a shchita of shor umari, of the ox and of this fattened animal. And al kol shisha kol shesh v'shesh psios, every 6 steps, then they would bring the animals of shiva parim and shiva elim. So that's a lot of animals. I mean, even if you walk 10 feet, like 10 steps, every step is a whole thing. So it says the Gemara, Amarle Rav Chiz, that can't be. Im Kain Milei says, Kol Eretz Yisrael b'bamos. Every time you bring a korban, you have to build a bama. If you're going every step you're going to take, you have to build a new bama. The whole city is going to be filled with bamos. That's ridiculous. So the Gemara says a third of the way down, only every 6 steps would we then shech the shor umari, the ox and the fattened animal, and al kol shisha sidarim shal shesh pesios, on every 6 units of 6 steps, every 36 steps, then shiva parim shiva elim. Okay, just different discussions of how often korbanos were brought during the transportation of the Aron. One pasuk says ksiv kidon, and the other pasuk says uchsiv nachon, different places. Rav Yochanan b'tchila kidon u'levasof nachon, different locations. One started in one place and ended in another. The pasuk, the Tosefta over here is now brought in the middle of the page, almost a third of the way down. The Gemara says, and it's a little choppy because we learned about this yesterday, Nimtei Sata Omer, that when we talk about the different collections of stones that we were discussing, the 12 stones here and 12 stones there, the Gemara says, there were three. Echad Sheheki Moshe be'eretz Moab. There was one set of rocks that was set up by Moshe and Moab, Shene'emar be'ever hayardein be'eretz Moab ho'il Moshe be'er. And we know the word be'er from our sugya. Halan hu omer v'chasav talein is called divrei Torah azos. That's by the Yarden v'asya be'er. So that we see that is where some stones are. The ones we were just talking about. That's episode number 2 of the stones. And then that's the third place. So we have a lot going on with the stones. Ayin Sham and Marsha and in the Ein Yaakov. That's where we should be looking. We keep seeing 12. Is it Shvatim? Is it futuristic? Okay, fine. Rabbanan says the Gemara 2/3 of the way down. Ketzad Kasvu Yisrael es Torah. We know that in the stones by the Yarden that they had written the 70 versions of the Torah, 70 languages of the Torah on the stone. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, it was written directly al gabe avonim kasvuha, and shenemar v'chasavta al ho avonim directly as called divrei Torah zos ve'achar kach sadu osan b'sid, and then it was covered by limestone. Says the Gemara, that's unfair. Amar lo Reb Shimon lidvarecha. If in fact it was written on the stone directly, and then covered in lime, so says the Gemara, that's not fair. Heach lamdu umos shel. This is not the right language. Heichan lamdu umos ha'olam Torah. How would it be that the umos olam would know that the Torah is emes? Says the Gemara, Amar lo bina yiser nasam b'makadosh baruch hu. The Kadosh Baruch Hu gave them extra wisdom. Yes, in fact, it was written on the stone and then it was painted over. However, they had extra wisdom. B'shigru notirin shelahem, the wise ones of them, the kilfu esasi, they peeled off the outer layer. V'hishua ve'al davar zeh nischatem gzar dinam leve'er shachash hayalahen lelamed v'lo lamdu. This was on them that they should have peeled it off and they didn't. So there was extra wisdom there. This reminds me of the whole, the first mimer in Kovetz Mamarim, Rabbi Chanan, that like a bar mitzvah boy is supposed to have the tfisos of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We're grown adults, we barely understand what we're talking about. We stand there at Shachris and we shuckle and we, come on, I mean, like you expect a 13-year-old, you have a ger. How much knowledge can a person possibly have? So the Gemara, the Rabbi Chanan what writes that it's like an onion. When you peel away that which distracts us, so then minei bay, well, it'll flow from within us. But because we're so distracted, all the layers of schmutz, spiritual schmutz, of physical distractions. But if we could really think unadulterated, HaKadosh Baruch Hu would be so obvious to us. So here it seems a little different. Here it seems that they were held accountable. The Goy was held accountable because there he dealt also with the question by the Goy, the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. That the Sheva Mitzvos B'nai Noach. So he asked the same question as the Bar Mitzvah boy. The answer is that it's inside of us. We have to just remove the things that are distracting. Anyways, Reb Shimon had a different opinion. 12 lines from the bottom. Reb Shimon Omer al gabe sid kasvu. No, they had the rocks. Then they put sid. They put lime on it, and then they wrote the Torah. V'chasvu lahen lamata, and it said underneath it, laman asher lo yilamdu eschem la'asos kechol v'gomer v'chulei. Says the Gemara, what do we learn from here? That if in fact the Goyim would have done tshuva, no problem. We would have happily embraced them. Amar Rava Bar Shila, my time at Reb Shimon. Why does he say that it was written on top of the sid? Sid. It was the nations that were from the sid that was burning. Al iske sid, that which is talking about, which was written on the sid, which is the Torah that he said was written on that top layer. Rabbi Yehuda Kisid Masid Ein Lo Takana L'Sreifa Af Osam Hakusim. This is actually not the appropriate language. If you look here on the side, it says that Defus Yishanim Lifnei HaTzenzor, that the censors. This comes up in Shas periodically, where we see moments where the censors came through Shas and removed some things. I'm surprised they didn't remove a lot more. There's a lot of things in the Gemara that are super provocative in regards to Goyim. I don't understand why they picked this. Okay, it's about umos olam. Sa'af osam umos ha'olam ein lem takana el asreifa. Kaman azah hadatanya who is the author of the following brisa, Vishavisa Shivyo. This is talking about it in Eishes Yafas Toar. On the one hand, we're supposed to wipe out all of the 7 nations that live in Eretz Yisrael. But let's say that this woman is out of town. She's on vacation, right? So this is a Canaanite woman, and she's in Mitzrayim. It says the Gemara, "L'rabos Kananim shebechutza la'aretz shim chozrim b'tshuva mekablen osam." That means that if you have a woman who is a Canaanite and she's outside of Eretz Yisrael, but if she does tshuva, then we don't kill her. We say that's fine. We don't have to kill her. So it says the Gemara, "Come on, who's that like?" That has to be like Rav Shimon, who says that there is an aspect of tshuva that applies to the Shiva Amim and to the nations that we're supposed to kill. So that's what the Gemara concludes, Rav Shimon, on that top line of Lamed Vav and Aleph. We'll pick up in Yirtzeh Hashem tomorrow night with Lamed Vav and Lamed Zayin. Oh my gosh, Lamed Vav and Beis is big. All right, we'll do our best. Wishing you all a beautiful night.